Well, as you told you at the top of the hour, the jury only needed roughly 9 hours to deliberate over the course of 2 days for R. Kelly to go from a former superstar to a convicted racketeer and sex trafficker. Senior trial counsel and criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona was in the courtroom during the trial. She also served as a former prosecutor in Brooklyn, where the trial was held. And welcome back, Bernarda, to the show. First of all, let's talk about the amount of time that it took the jury to come back with their verdict, with everything that was at stake, with all the testimony they heard, with the amount of charges that were out there, especially under the racketeering charge. Were you surprised about how quickly they came back with this verdict?
Look, in the 16 years that I was a prosecutor, I found that this was a very fast verdict in terms of the number of counts that he had that was facing that they had to look at in the indictment. But aside from that, from the complexity of being able to read that indictment and read those charges and the amount of victims that existed, it seemed like it was just record-breaking that they had this jury verdict within just a couple of hours. I was expecting at least a couple of days.
Yeah, especially when they asked for blueprints and they asked for other things and other items. What stood out to you about the jury's request for this type of evidence while they were in deliberation?
So now as I look at it, it seems that they only had an issue with Jane Doe number 3. And Jane Doe number 3 was Stephanie, who claimed that she had met R. Kelly. She didn't have a long-term relationship with R. Kelly, but that she came to try to interview R. Kelly and that she was kidnapped inside of a room for at least 2 days, then drugged, and some kind of sexual activity took place with R. Kelly. So it seems by the note on Friday, as well as the note that they had yesterday morning, that was the only holdup that they had in this deliberation.
All right, so it takes 9 hours. We're coming in. You're in the courtroom. We don't have cameras in the courtroom, so we're not allowed, so we wouldn't see the reaction. Give us an idea of how R. Kelly reacted, how his defense reacted once the verdict was read.
So when it comes to the verdict, that's usually the time when all attorneys are nervous. I mean, even when I'm not even the person that's on trial and I'm not the attorney on trial, and I was even nervous to hear the verdict because you just never know what the jury is going to say. That's why people say, well, roll the dice and take a jury verdict. R. Kelly was just sitting, of course, in his chair, sitting upright with his mask, his COVID mask that was covering him. So because his COVID mask was covering him, you couldn't get much of a reaction. It's not like he put his head down once the verdict was given. He was just there, just frozen as if he were a statue. But the room was definitely quiet. You can hear a pin drop and just to hear guilty, 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 one after another just sent such a loud message.
Any message that is sent to you as far as like, were you surprised that every one of the counts he was found guilty on?
I was definitely surprised because I just didn't see that this was an enterprise in the normal sense of how an enterprise is used in the federal system. Usually you use it to bring down mafias. You bring down mob people, bring down gangs, but never talking about a normal business, talking about a recording artist, talking about the king of R&B, talking about the Pied Piper. So I was definitely surprised in terms of what the charge was, that they came back guilty. In terms of the number of victims, obviously, we're talking about 6 victims in the indictment, but you heard more than from 6. You heard from uncharged victims, Jane Doe's and John Doe's.
Yeah, I mean, so now I know you're a prosecutor, but put your defense attorney on. With everything you just said, I mean, the attorney said the appeal is likely. Does he have any grounds for an appeal?
So I'm a criminal defense attorney now, but I will tell you this. In terms of an appeal, everyone has a right to appeal. That doesn't mean that your appeal is going to be granted. That doesn't mean that your conviction is going to be reversed. I think a few grounds, of course, with every objection that R. Kelly attorney made during the trial, each one of those objections is him preserving his right to an appeal. Whether he's going to appeal on ineffective assistance of counsel, I highly doubt it'll be granted. I mean, he received competent counsel, but aside from that, I think he may have a chance of being heard in terms of the government being allowed to bring in so many Jane Doe's and John Doe's to testify against him that are not named the indictment, especially the John Doe's, because to hear from the 2 males that R. Kelly had a relationship, what does that have to do with the charges? What does that have to do with any of the Jane Does that are listed in the indictment? So that may be a cause for an appeal there.
All right, so I understand you're familiar with this judge in this case. Let's put your criminal defense attorney hat on. Obviously, that's what you do. If you're R. Kelly's attorney right now, what are you doing to try and get a more lenient sentence, or rather than what he's facing?
Look, it's going to be hard. He's facing anywhere from a minimum of 10 years to life, and that's just on one count, because he can get consecutive time, because you're talking about multiple victims here. At least Jane Doe 5 and Jane Doe 6 can lead you up to multiple consecutive counts. Judge Donnelly was a prosecutor for 25 years, and then she was a state court judge, and then just recently got on the bench. When it comes to getting a lenient sentence, because there's going to be a pre-sentence investigation report, the probation officer is going to interview R. Kelly, and the defense counsel is going to have to submit a sentencing memorandum. The problem with that is that if you are going to seek leniency, they're going to ask for you to show some kind of culpability, some kind of admission, and it's not going to happen in this case. Why? Because R. Kelly is seeking to appeal, so he's not going to admit to anything that he did. However, what you may see in this report is that R. Kelly's attorney may put in the report, like, look, R. Kelly is a victim himself. R. Kelly was sexually violated when he was a kid, so he may ask the judge to take that into account in the sentencing to figure out what kind of lower range of a sentence he can get, because it's all in the discretion of Judge Donnelly.
And I know it's speculation, but since you just said all of that and you're familiar with the judge, what do you expect?
I think the judge would, at the very minimum, give him 20 years. I see minimum at least 20 years. I don't think she gives anything less than 20 years in this case.
All right, we shall find out in May. Senior trial counsel and criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona hanging out with us here on Start Your Day. We really appreciate your time and joining us with your perspective and your analysis in this case. Thank you.